Hello, I'm back. Happy September. Welcome to another crime dive. My name is Crystal Sky, and if you're anything like me, you find yourself drawn to true crime cases. So that's what I talk about here. It's what I make videos about, like many others out there. If you also like true crime and want to feel better about your makeup skills, you should absolutely like, subscribe, and let's hang out together every other Tuesday, where I will take a deep dive look into a true crime case while slapping on the old clown paint. Yes, welcome. I'm back. So sorry I had to take last week off. So I don't know if you noticed in my little intro there, I said every other Tuesday. So after doing some thinking and a lot of consideration, I've decided that I have to start uploading videos like every 2 weeks. I'm really sorry. It's just the research has gotten so out of control, and this is just sort of like exploded into way more work than I ever thought, that I really need to step back so that I can maintain the same level of quality of research and stuff. Because as it is right now, oh my God, I that's all I'm doing is research and editing and filming, and that's it. And it just really sucks because there's other stuff in my life that needs my attention that I would like to get to. I have other projects that I want to work on that I'm just not able to. Plus, I wanted to bring more content to the channel, and I haven't been able to do any of it just because of just how overwhelming this has become, just because I love research, man. I want to know every single detail that I can. And yeah, man, and some of these cases you guys throw at me have so much information. I love case suggestions. There's actually one case suggestion that I've been working on for the better part of a year, maybe a little over at this point, but there's just so much to it that I've had to research it in parts, because there's just so much. And yeah, that's just one of really meaty cases that I've been working on. But in the meantime, because I've been wanting to, upload every week, I've been trying to find other cases that I can still do deep dives on, but that doesn't require weeks and weeks and weeks of research, I don't know. Jeff just really strongly suggested that I go to, every other week, so that will allow me some time to catch up on some stuff, in addition to being able to add more content to the channel. I really want to do the Crime Dip series again, but I think I want to sort of play with the format a little bit. I wasn't really digging the format I was doing. So yeah, on top of that, plus another series that I would love to introduce on my channel that I would probably do once a month, that I, again, haven't been able to work on. Yeah, I have to go to every 2 weeks so I can, start working on that stuff so I can add more stuff to the channel. Plus, oh God, I know, I feel so terrible, guys. I'm so behind on comments. I always mean to set aside an hour or two just to kind of go through them and talk, because I want to communicate, I want to talk with the community and engage and all that. I mean, part of this is discussing it. I want to see what you guys think of this case, And not to mention, there's been some times where I'll get a piece of information wrong, or I'll say something wrong or something. And I love, having people being able to be hey, correct me on that, So yeah, I feel so bad. I am getting to the comments. That's part of the reason I have to go to every 2 weeks. And Red Bull and Coffee, I have seen your comment. Yes. Let's collaborate. I will respond to your comment. And yeah, we'll exchange email addresses and stuff, because I totally want to collaborate. Like I said, I want to be part, of the little community here, because I really, truly do appreciate, all of you guys who watch, who comment. I can't believe I'm over 2,000 subscribers. I know some people roll your eyes, and just be oh, that's not that much. But to me, that's huge. I never in a million years would have thought anyone would be interested in anything I had to do. I just started doing this, I've watched Bailey and Danielle and all the other great ones out there. And I was this looks like fun. I'm good at research. I've always been into true crime, and I like playing around with makeup and looking like a jackass. So, why not? And most importantly, it enables me to get my editing skills working. When you're a freelancer, you go months in between jobs and stuff, and editing, like any other skill, definitely deteriorates if you don't use it, All that to say, just thank you so much. Just thank you. I really do appreciate appreciate it. And yeah, thank you for the case suggestions. I love it. And yeah, like I said, I'm working on getting up to the comments and all that stuff. So yeah, that's the end of my spiel. That is why I have to go to every 2 weeks now. And hopefully in the next few months, I'll be able to catch up and like add more content to the channel to where I am uploading every week. You know what I mean? I've got a lot of stuff I want to do. So yeah, with all that out of the way, yeah, going to a 2-week schedule. So the next Crime Dive video will be on September 19th. Okay, with all of that nonsense out of the way, all right? With all that nonsense out of the way, let's talk about today's case. So if you remember, the last case we covered was Lori hacking, right? And we uncovered all of like the bizarre and awful lies and deception that Mark had. This case, oh my lord, y'all, the lies and the double life that was revealed in this case, I don't know, this case is wild. It's technically still ongoing. There are some who say that it's, wrapped up. We just don't have that final cross on the T, to kind of really put an end to this case. While others, believe the perpetrator in this case is still on the loose, living his life free and clear. Today, we will be talking about the case of Mike Bullinger. Now, I was kind of confused because some news reports said it was Bullinger, and then I saw other news reports that said Bullinger. So I'm going to go with Bullinger. That was what I saw, the most of. It's so weird when, there cannot be a consistent pronunciation on names. It's so frustrating. So yeah, I'm going to go with Mike Bullinger, all right? It's easier to say. And man, y'all, get ready for just a tragic, bizarre case. It's wild. And trigger warnings, nothing too graphic. One of the victims is a teenager, unfortunately. So yeah, there's that. I don't think there's anything too graphic in detail here, though. So yeah, again, just kind of general warning diving into true crime. Alrighty, let's get into this case. So, as we normally do, let's begin with one of our victims in this case. So, Nadja Sasson was born on December 5th, 1969, somewhere in Germany. Now, unfortunately, I don't know a whole lot about Nadja's upbringing, her childhood, anything like that. I don't even know when she left her home country of Germany to immigrate to the United States, but at some point in her life, Nadja did immigrate from Germany to the US. Yeah, not sure if she was a young woman, maybe older, child, not sure. And I don't know when she met her future husband, Todd Medley, but at some point when she, immigrated to the US, she met and fell in love with her husband, Todd Medley. She changed her name to Nadja Medley, and I'm not sure when they were married, just that, yeah, they met, fell in love, got married, and the couple ended up residing in South Weber, Utah. Yeah, we're doing another Utah case. Kind of. We'll get into it. South Weber is located right outside of Ogden, Utah. The couple would end up having a daughter who they named Peyton, and she was born sometime in 2002. I don't know her exact birth date, just that she was born sometime around 2002. Now, Nadja and Todd would have a second child, and Nadja would give birth a second time in 2011, but unfortunately, after a few days, the baby died. Now, it is said Todd and Nadja worked together at some sort of pet store that was located in Ogden. But at the time of the events of today's case, it was reported that Nadja worked as a massage therapist at sort of like a spa massage therapy center. Although she did not have, what did they call it? Like a massage therapy occupational license or something like that. I guess there's some license that you have to have, and Nadja did not have this, but she was working as a massage therapist at this center. Her brother-in-law, so Todd's brother, Mark Medley, described his sister-in-law, quote, Nadja was independent, a woman with a stoic exterior whose nurturing side came out when she tended to her many animals. Nadja had a lot of compassion for animals and loved being around them. She was a very compassionate person. She was extremely intelligent and knew 5 different languages. So a neighbor who lived next door to Nadja, Rex Fustol, spoke about how much Nadja loved animals. Quote, she was a nice woman and also an animal freak. She had 5 dogs, 2 ferrets, a couple of cats, parrots in the house, and at one time she had chickens, goats, rabbits, and then she got a pig, which they kept out the back. Now, while working at the massage slash like spa therapy center, Nadja met a really good friend who was also a coworker, and her name was Rebecca Lorenz. And she talked about how close her and Nadja got. Quote, "She was really close with me and my two girls. She was a really good friend. I could talk to her about anything and everything." Nadja had another friend named Michelle Holbrook, who described her friend as being like one of those like healing types. Quote, "Nadja was a massage therapist. She was also into healing things. I know that she sold kombucha teas. She was very earthy." Nadja had yet another friend named Christine Ropel, who lived about a mile away from her in South Weber, and she also described Nadja like calling her a hippie. Quote, "I called her my hippie friend. She was into natural living, gardening. She was highly principled. Her daughter Peyton was amazing, a straight-A student. Peyton was the kind of young girl that you look to and say, that is the future." Now, it said Peyton was so smart that Nadja and Todd were actually speaking about like putting her in like some sort of like specialty school for the gifted. Peyton had a good friend named Sydney Call who said Peyton was just as sweet as her mother. Quote, "Peyton was the most kind-hearted girl that I have ever met. She was so sweet. She wore her heart on her sleeve, and she had the brightest smile. She lit up anybody's day." She said that Nadja and Peyton's relationship was very, very close. Mother and daughter had a very close, very sweet relationship. Quote, "They were super, super close. They were friends just as much as mother and daughter. But unfortunately, on August 30th, 2014, so when Peyton was, about 11 or 12 or so, Todd passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack, which of course, not just caused emotional trauma for poor Nadja and Peyton, but also caused a lot of financial difficulties for Nadja. It was said at the time of his death, Todd was unemployed, and he didn't have any money that he left behind to his family or anything. So Nadja and Peyton kind of struggled financially after his death. Can you imagine, not dealing with losing your spouse, Peyton, her father, but now, poor Nadja, now she has to worry, oh my God, how are we going to pay our bills? How am I going to feed my kid? I can't imagine, dude. That's awful. But things started to look up in 2015. All right, it was at some point in 2015 where Nadja met Mike Bullinger when she was at work. He had come in for some back pain, and Nadja was his scheduled, assigned massage therapist, and the two just hit it off. Now, it is said, as we sort of just alluded to, Nadja was in a really low point in her life when she met Mike. It is said she was still really broken up about her husband's death. She was still grieving. On top of still grieving the loss of her second child. Remember, when Todd died, she had not a miscarriage. She gave birth to that baby, and I don't know how long it lived, but it died after being born. That only happened in 2011, 3 years before Todd's death. And it said Nadja was still grieving the loss of her second child as well. But Rebecca said it was Mike who made Nadja smile again. Quote, "Nadja had gone through a really rough time. She had struggled not only with the loss of her baby, but the loss of her husband as well, and she was pretty down. Up until she met Mike. Mike was the first time I saw her smile, and she just had a glow constantly. She was truly happy. It just looked like she was in love. She was so happy. She was smiling all the time." It said Nadja was instantly attracted to Mike and just thought he had a really great, fun personality, and the two just clicked. So let's get a little bit into this guy that Nadja has come across and has fallen so head over heels in love with. So Gerald Mike Bullinger was born on April 6th, 1957, and I'm not sure where. I think he may have been born somewhere in Utah. I know he was raised in Ogden, Utah, so I wasn't too sure if he was also born there, but he was raised in Ogden, was raised Mormon, and was very, very into the outdoors, very outdoorsy type of guy. He met his first wife, Jackie Garcia, who was a fellow Mormon, when both of them were freshmen at Ricks College, which was in Rexburg, Idaho, and this was sometime in the 1970s. Ricks College is now known as Brigham Young University, Idaho. So, like many fellow Mormons, Mike did serve a mission. He served a mission in Manila in 1976. And when he got back, he and Jackie ended up getting married in 1978 at one of the LDS temples in Salt Lake City. The couple ended up residing in Billings, Montana. I know Mike had a lot of family there, so maybe he was born in Montana. Not too sure. But Jackie and Mike ended up settling there. Now, Jackie recalled... All right, she recalled that right after they were married, Mike completely changed. He was not the same guy that she dated. And we all know this story, right? When they just flip a switch after, they're married or have a kid with someone or whatever. Yeah, that's what Jackie experienced. A completely different side of Mike that she didn't know existed. Quote, I knew it was a mistake as soon as I got home from the honeymoon. Jackie and Mike would end up being married for 10 years and would end up having 2 sons together. And in between all of that, Mike was emotionally, physically, and mentally abusive to his wife. On top of being unfaithful, yes, he was also a serial cheater. Now, Jackie said it was during their first year of marriage that she realized there was like this dark, violent side to her husband. So I guess they were arguing about something. Jackie was on the floor. I don't know, like sitting on the floor doing something. The article just said she was sitting on the floor and he was standing over her, with rage on his face because they were arguing. And she said, quote, I looked at his face and I said, you wanted to hit me, didn't you? And he said, yes. And less than a year after this argument, Mike would physically assault Jackie for the first time in their marriage. Quote, he would hit me once and then I would quit talking. I don't remember what the arguments were about. He just wanted to be the boss. Now, Jackie said she went to the president of their local LDS church for some help. She was hoping maybe some intervention, maybe some therapy or something for Mike. Like, she needed to talk to someone, right? But this LDS president, who had known Mike and his family since Mike was a child, said, quote, he couldn't believe Mike would do that. Jackie sought couples counseling through the church's services, called domestic violence hotlines, sent Mike to therapy for batterers, and even spoke to her in-laws, Mike's own parents, about their son's violent behavior. But no one ever helped Jackie. And the problem was no one really believed her. Mike was a classic abuser, classic asshole, where he put on this facade for everyone else. No, he's such a great guy. Are you sure he's beating you, Jackie? Are you sure? That was the gist of what Jackie endured. And that is what a lot of spouses who are abused encounter, especially if the abuser, right, is like a beloved member of the community or family or something, right? And yeah, Jackie spoke about this, how, it was just difficult. And Mike, of course, would always deny being abusive. Quote, you could catch him red-handed. God could be pointing at him and he'd still lie all over the place. Now, as we mentioned before, Mike was also a serial cheater. And on top of that, he was a master manipulator. I mean, we just kind of went over briefly about those kind of skills he had, right? But it is said he was one of those guys, right? He was one of those manipulators that, he could fit whatever mold he needed people to. You know what I'm saying? Jackie said, quote, he compartmentalized. He was whatever way somebody needed him to be. Finally, in 1988, the couple divorced. But unfortunately, Mike's violent behavior just transferred to his sons. Yeah. She said, quote, our younger son told me once after we were divorced that his dad had hit him. I had sole custody and called Mike and told him that was not allowed, that he could not hit the boys to discipline them. He didn't agree or disagree. He just took it in. The next time the boys came home after being with Mike, they told me that their dad had sat them down and said that whatever happened at his house was to stay at his house, that it wasn't my business. Oh, hell no, you pig. Hell no. None of her business. She's the mother. Screw you, man. Ugh. The more I read about this guy, just the more infuriated I got. I was like, oh my God, this is the worst kind of scumbag. It's always frustrating too, right? When everyone comes out in defense of him. No, he was such a great guy. What? He can't be like this. It drives me nuts. It's you ever stop to think that maybe you just see one side of someone that they don't show anyone else or that they just show to other people? Does that ever cross anybody's mind? And before the ink was even dry on Mike and Jackie's divorce, he was already shacked up with another woman who would end up becoming his second wife. Now, I have not been able to find out who this woman is, what her name is, or anything like that. But we just know that she would become Mike's second wife. And like with Jackie, he would constantly cheat on her. I don't know if he also abused her. I would have to imagine, right? Abusers don't stop at just one. So I would imagine he also physically abused her. But the things that were reported was that he definitely cheated on her. And he actually, one of the women he cheated on a second wife with would end up becoming his third wife. Oh, yes. It was a woman named Cheryl Baker. Let's talk a little bit about Cheryl. So Cheryl Jean Baker was born on September 6th, 1960 in Detroit, Michigan. Her parents were Harold Leroy and Doris Marguerite Baker. She had two brothers named Byron and Lyle and a sister named Joy. I'm not sure if Cheryl was oldest, middle, or youngest, not sure. Now, Byron said that his sister was very creative. She loved arts and crafts and described her as a sort of quiet, spiritual person who was also very environmentally conscious. Quote, she was into crafts and made all kinds of things and would knit scarves and mittens and clothing that she would sell. She was a very loving person. Everybody liked her and she was warm and fuzzy with everybody and soft-spoken and quiet. Cheryl was also a practicing Hindu and a vegetarian, as well as being really, really outdoorsy. She loved doing stuff outdoors, loved to travel. She rode in some sort of Michigan statewide sort of bicycle run with her father one year. And after that, they just made it a family tradition. As a teenager, Cheryl worked as a lifeguard. She would actually later in life use the training, the CPR training that she learned being a lifeguard to save a person's life. She performed CPR on a coworker until the ambulance could get there to stabilize him. And it is said that she also saved a puppy from drowning as well. Yeah, isn't that sweet? Cheryl is such a sweetie, and she really seemed to have really loved the water. She swam with dolphins in the Bahamas, swam with turtles in Florida, river rafted through the Grand Canyon, and took summer trips to India and Alaska very often. She ended up graduating college with a bachelor's degree in hearing impairment, and she would later go back and get her master's degree in education. Cheryl would end up spending her career working with deaf students, and she began her teaching career in 1984, and that would be what she sort of dedicated her career on, was helping students who are hearing impaired. And it is in 1984 when she started her teaching career where she moved from her home state of Michigan to Ogden, Utah. She worked for the Utah School for the Deaf and Blind and was said to just be very, very compassionate, very sweet, really caring about her students and helping them. A good friend of hers named Nancy Powers said, quote, Cheryl was a compassionate person and it showed in everything she did. I think a good example is the career she chose. And as we know, she met Mike while he was still married to a second wife. Although I am 99% certain that Cheryl was not aware he was married when she first met him. I couldn't find anything that explicitly stated that, but as we'll get into the story, I think you'll probably agree with me that Cheryl more than likely did not know Mike was actively married when she first met him. And she first met Mike around 2006, 2007, somewhere around there. And it was while on a plane to Alaska. I think she was probably going on one of her usual trips to Alaska. And she sat next to Mike and they struck up a conversation. Nancy said, quote, she and Mike met on an airplane and I think Mike was sitting next to her. They talked for a long time and evidently exchanged phone numbers. And yeah, evidently they struck up a relationship afterwards. And Mike and Cheryl would end up married in 2010 in Park City, Utah. Their license was issued on August 19th of that year, and they had a ceremony scheduled for September 6th. Now, this was Cheryl's first and only wedding, and she had actually sewn her own wedding gown for the ceremony, even calling Cheryl up the night before to help her do some last minute alterations and stuff. That is a skill I really, really would love to learn and develop. I have a sewing machine and everything, and I really want to develop that skill. Sewing, that is such a cool skill. Now, Byron, Cheryl's brother, said that the couple even had two separate ceremonies so that their elderly mother could attend. And Cheryl and Mike ended up moving into Cheryl's house that she had in Ogden, and the two seemed to live a pretty relatively normal, happy marriage and life. And it is said they really enjoy doing outdoor activities together. In 2011, Cheryl won the Teacher of the Year award that was handed out by the University of Utah College of Education, Utah's College of Education. And for a few years, she was even president of her school's Teachers Association, the school she worked at, where it is said that she really advocated for her students, trying to get grants and funding for them. It is said that she would even buy her students supplies if their families were really struggling. And in 2012, I know some of her hearing impaired students that she taught gained a little bit of media attention when I think they wrote and put on some sort of opera or something. I tried to find more information about that, but I was unable to. And after working for the Utah School of the Deaf and Blind for many, many years, in 2016, Cheryl went ahead and became an art teacher at Greenwood Charter School, located in Harrisville. Mike, meanwhile, worked as a pilot, specifically as a private pilot, flying for Classic Aviation Services in Utah. He was also a licensed aircraft instructor until around 2012. Now, since Mike was such an avid outdoorsman, he also worked as like a guide and outfitter for hunters in like the local area, even running his own outfitting business at some point in time. Not sure when or where he operated this business, but the bottom line is Mike was very outdoorsy, knew about wilderness and survival and hunting and all that stuff. Very active, avid outdoors guy. I mean, he was even like a guide for other hunters and stuff, you know? Like, this guy knew what he was doing. And it is said, despite their differences, Cheryl was described as being more eclectic, like doing, you know, meditation and crocheting and stuff, while Mike, you know, liked to collect guns and fly. They made the marriage work. And it said Cheryl was very happy with her husband. And they also had a lot of similar interests as well. Remember, Cheryl was also really into the outdoors, and so the couple would often, you know, go camping, they'd go hiking, they do all kinds of like outdoors adventures together. And of course, Mike's experience as a guide in like backcountry woods, you know, helped them and aided them when they would like go out and do these like, you know, back outdoor like wilderness camping and stuff. He and Cheryl were, of course, avid bikers together as well. Mike's handle was, I guess, double. I guess he had it on like his helmet or something. And the couple even owned a couple of mules that they would take when they would like go on their little like outdoorsy adventures and stuff. So yeah, even though their personalities seemed kind of different, you know, Cheryl's sort of like, you know, maybe more peaceful and laid back and calm, whereas Mike was sort of, you know, kind of like out there, active doing stuff and whatnot. They, you know, made the marriage work and had a lot of similar interests. Now, interestingly enough, I could not find any reports of Mike abusing Cheryl, like physically assaulting her. I don't even know if he like physically assaulted his second wife either. Like, I mean, a guy just doesn't stop doing that, right? But like, I feel like if he physically assaulted Cheryl, that would have been reported on. So I thought that was just very weird and very interesting. Are some domestic abusers like that? Where they abuse like one spouse and then they go and marry later on and they don't abuse that one? I don't know. I thought that was super weird. But yeah, it seemed Cheryl and Mike had a very happy marriage and everyone thought so. Her brother said, quote, "They owned mules up on the mountain near Ogden, which they used to ride. And I remember she once planned a week-long rafting trip through the Grand Canyon that they went on. They seemed perfectly matched. They had the same thoughts, the same likes and dislikes. They'd go off to the backcountry together, hiking, river rafting. They were very active." Mike and Cheryl were also listed as lifelong members of the Sri Ganesha Hindu Temple of Utah, which was located in South Jordan. Isn't that interesting? Remember, I said earlier, Mike was a master manipulator. He was able to fit whatever mold someone wanted. So when he was with Jackie, you know, they were both Mormon because he was raised Mormon. And now that he's with Cheryl, who is Hindu, now all of a sudden Mike is Hindu himself. In fact, it is said Mike was so committed to the bit, he actually learned Sanskrit and attended the temple with Cheryl regularly, like as if he too was Hindu. And Nadja, completely unaware that Mike was still married to Cheryl when they met, ended up dating him and really falling hard. Yep, that is right. Even if he didn't physically abuse Cheryl, he certainly still cheated. That was still very much part of Mike's MO. And poor Nadja, poor Cheryl, like, these poor women being manipulated and just screwed over by this massive, massive piece of human waste. I'm trying not to cuss too much because I feel like I've cussed a lot, but like, believe me, there's some nasty things I would love to say about Mike here. But yeah, I mean, when Nadja met Mike and started falling for him and dating him, yeah, he was living his life with Cheryl, and Nadja was so none the wiser. Cheryl was so none the wiser. It's so sad. Rebecca, remember Nadja's friend at work, said, quote, "She was head over heels in love with Mike. Mike really got Nadja to turn all of the sorrow around. She became this happy person. Remember, like, Nadja was still grieving her husband and her second child. Ugh. It's just so Heartbreaking, man. It's not right. Christine, remember Nadja's other friend, echoed the same sentiment. Quote, I had not seen Nadja that happy in a long time. I think I already mentioned this earlier, but remember, yeah, Christine and Nadja were especially close because, Christine lived very near Nadja, I think within a mile. And she had known Nadja for about 9 years. Quote, Nadja had great morals and she would have never been that close to Mike if she knew he was married. In 2015, Christine had actually moved to Florida, and she said that she thought Mike was, quote, okay, but kind of quiet. Mike was really good to Peyton from everything Nicole told me. I think Nicole was another friend that they had. Mark, Nadja's brother-in-law, Todd's brother, echoed this same sentiment that there was no way Nadja would have knowingly, consciously, maliciously hooked up with a married man. Quote, I know for a fact that she absolutely, positively did not know about Cheryl. I know Nadja well enough that if she did know about Cheryl, she never would have gotten involved with Mike. Mike had told Nadja that he had been divorced for 10 years when they met, and he had been alone ever since. He was a private pilot and flew clients all over the country. He also said, very much like her, he was also a die-hard atheist. So Mike is Mormon with Jackie, Hindu with Cheryl, and now is an atheist with Nadja, because that's what Nadja was. Mike even grew close to Peyton, leg wrestling with her, teaching her how to shoot a pistol, and it is said Peyton really idolized him. Remember, Peyton was at a really, vulnerable point in her life as well, right? Her dad had passed away right when she was 11 or 12, right when she's beginning to blossom, right, into a young adult, starting on that journey. And then here comes Mike, who just seems to be so cool and fun-loving and taking care of her mother. And it said Peyton just really, really fell for him too. She thought he was a great father figure. Rebecca said, quote, he just took really good care of her. He would take her out. He would take her to dinner. He would take them hiking. Peyton was very close with Mike. He took really good care of her, too. Sometimes Mike would pick up Peyton from school, and sometimes he would take Peyton out to lunch. Peyton even got to the point where she started calling Mike Dad. And both Nadja and Peyton's Facebook page and profile was just full of photos with them out enjoying things with Mike. They would be going out to dinner, baseball games, rodeos, hiking, concerts, horseback riding, and it was all just plastered right there on Facebook. Michelle, Nadja's other friend, said, quote, he just made her feel great. He made her feel beautiful. He made her feel happy. He made her feel loved, and he spoiled her. Every time I turn around, there's another picture on her Facebook about a rodeo or a concert or a hike. After she met Mike, you just saw that living spark come back in her. But there was one thing that Nadja noticed about her and Mike's relationship, and that was that they never really spent the night together. He didn't really spend the night at her house, and vice versa. And that was despite them living very close to each other. That's right. Cheryl and Mike only lived 7 or 8 miles away from Nadja. Rebecca said, quote, Nadja had said that she had spent the night at his house one time. I never understood why they never spent the night at each other's house. In my head, he hadn't been in a relationship in over 10 years. So I was just thinking maybe he doesn't want to get into anything too fast. And yeah, this is how Mike lived his life for a little while, having 2 full-blown relationships with these women. And neither woman was aware of the other. I don't know how this guy did it. I don't know how some of these dudes do it, but he successfully juggled this double life that he was living. And I think what helped was part of the fact that he was a pilot, right? So it was easy for him to dip out on both women for days, maybe even weeks at a time, right? Because you could say, oh, well, I'm flying this client all the way across the country or wherever. And it was the perfect cover. And so, yeah, neither woman was suspicious. But then at some point, not exactly sure when, but at some point, Nadja asked Mike for some financial help. Remember, we said when Todd died, poor Nadja was in a really tight financial spot, and she needed help covering her mortgage that month. Rebecca said that Nadja had told her that she had accidentally seen one of Mike's paychecks, and it was for $10,000, and that he was making at least $10,000 a month. And that was why she had asked for financial assistance. Now, I guess Mike ignored Nadja the first 2 times she asked, so I don't know what that that means, if he just like changed the subject or what. But when she asked a third time, Mike stated that their relationship was just going way too fast. And he just couldn't do it anymore. It was just too much. The couple then broke up, which was, probably like several weeks before the events of today's case. But 2 weeks after the initial breakup, the couple got back together. Rebecca said Nadja showed her the text that Mike had sent her that just said, like, he couldn't live without her. Living apart from her was not good for him. Separating from her was just not the best way, and that he had to be with her. And so Nadja and Mike got back together. And the next thing Nadja's family and friends knew, in early 2017, Nadja announced that she and Peyton were moving to Caldwell, Idaho, to live with Mike in his 4-bedroom house that he had there on Sid Road, which contained 5 acres of property and outbuildings. It was near US 2026 intersection, or is it the US 2026 intersection, but whatever. And it was hidden by like lots of privacy trees and hedges, and had wilderness all around. Like, dudes, I saw like video and pictures of this property. Oh my God. I was just like, dude, that actually looks pretty sweet. Not gonna lie. Like, the older I get, the more I'm like, man, just go get a couple acres like up in the wilderness and just being away from everyone. Ugh, that sounds really nice. And that's what this property was. Like, seriously, I was looking at pictures. I was like, dude, like that's a cool, beautiful area. And it is said Mike was the one who asked Nadja and Peyton to come live with him. Christine said Nadja was very optimistic about this move. Quote, it just looked like it was going to be such a happy ending for her. And Rebecca added, quote, as long as they had each other, they could get through anything. He was a breath of fresh air, a new start. And that's what this move was, a new start. On March 25th, 2017, Nadja updated her Facebook status, and it read, quote, hi kids, long time no see. Don't get used to it though. This is just a really quick visit to let y'all know we're moving. That's right, a new home has been found, and Mike, Peyton, and I are moving in together. Boise, here we come. I'll keep my account active for a little while so I can see who still cares and answer any questions, comments you have. And let it be known, even though I'm not really on Facebook anymore, I love you all and miss you too. A few days later, on March 29th, Nadja posted, quote, okay folks, I have some news. Mike asked Peyton and myself to move to Boise with him once his new job's stable and he's settled in a bit. It's not an immediate thing, but we're working on getting the house in order and things settled. On that note, if anyone needs a cat, let me know. On April 20th, Nadja posted that the move was planned for May, towards the beginning of May, and that they would be living specifically in Caldwell. Quote, Boise peeps, need recommendations for the best sushi in town. We're moving up there the beginning of May, have found really good everything else, but sushi is not trial and error. All other food recommendations are welcome too, particularly diners. We'll be in Caldwell, but don't mind driving for grub. Mark said both Nadja and Peyton were, quote, very excited about moving up to Idaho because they were both ready for a new beginning after my brother passed away. On May 3rd, Nadja posted, quote, well, we're on our way to Boise. Dogs, cats, bunnies, chickens, fish, birds, snake, and people. One hell of a packing adventure. Holy crap. And 7 days later, on May 10th, 2017, Nadja posted a video of the property that her and Peyton were now living on with Mike. And she had like a video, scrolling across the property, and it was captioned with, quote, our new place. So in the video, she pans like the screen across the property, which shows 2 outbuildings, with one of those buildings being sort of like a shed, and she talks about it. Quote, well folks, here's my new backyard. Kind of liking this just a little bit. Still a little bit of fence to build here. Actually a lot. Dogs are the only thing that's grazing now, but that will change. And she pans to like the outbuildings specifically and says, quote, this is where the chickens live. Hay shed. You can't even see the house because of all the trees. Yeah, baby, we're loving it. And it looked like to all of Nadja's like family and friends and like Facebook friends that she was getting her happy ending after having a bunch of stuff to go through. Rebecca said Nadja would often text her just telling her how happy she was. Quote, I was happy for her. She was happy. When we texted, she said, we're just talking about how much we love living together. When I saw the video of Nadja that she posted at her new place in Idaho, you could hear the happiness in her voice. She was so happy. Sydney, Peyton's friend, said, quote, Nadja was very excited. She threw herself into the work that they were doing at the house, putting up fences, building pens, chickens, coops, rabbit runs. She was leaving all the pain, all the stress that she had in Utah. And for a while, Nadja did get her happy ending. Her and Peyton and Mike all lived happily in Idaho on that property. Nadja and Peyton, it said, especially just loved all of the land they now lived on, the beautiful wilderness that surrounded them. They had plenty of room for their animals. And yeah, they had numerous pets, as Nadja's post implied when they moved. They had dogs, cats, rats, rabbits, snakes. And Sydney added, quote, Peyton loved animals. She had quite a few pets. They had a snake, lizards, guinea pigs, goats, rabbits, you name it. They probably had it at one point. Peyton started a YouTube channel / vlog where she just kind of uploaded and just kind of talked about, just life and things, uploaded videos of her and her mother out enjoying stuff, doing stuff with Mike, like horseback riding. I think she posted a video of Mike showing her how to shoot a pistol. Remember, Mike was also a hunter, and not only was he an avid outdoorsman, he also was, I believe, a target shooter. He was good with guns. Nadja's second to last Facebook post was a picture of Peyton, and she had a pride flag painted on her cheek. I think they were going to go to a pride event that was going on in Boise. And Nadja captioned the photo with, quote, love this kid to death. Nadja's last Facebook post would be made on June 4th, and Peyton's last text to Sydney would be on June 6th. Another friend named Bethany Cagle said that Peyton went radio silent on her texts on June 9th. Quote, we had a 120-day Snapchat streak. We talked all day the 9th. It was 10 o'clock when I sent my last Snapchat. She never opened it. So we will pause in our telling right here. So we'll pause on Nadja, Peyton, and Mike in Idaho. And let's go back to Cheryl. What happened to Cheryl? I'm sure you're wondering okay, he's up here living with Nadja and Peyton. What happened to Cheryl? Let me tell you. So, as Nadja was, Cheryl was super happy with Mike, had no idea who was having an affair, no one was none the wiser. They had a, happy marriage. Cheryl was super happy. And remember, as with Nadja, he was able to disappear on Cheryl for days or weeks on end because he was a pilot, right? We talked about that earlier. Byron said, quote, they bought a trailer around a year ago, and Mike would often stay in that if he was away, but they'd always see each other on weekends or in between his jobs, or often enough for Cheryl to believe they were still married. Cheryl's pretty laid back, and she accepted that lifestyle. They never rowed about it. Lyle, Cheryl's other brother, said, quote, she just thought her marriage was perfect. Byron said that she seemed very enthusiastic and happy when they went on a river rafting trip together, I think out as a family in 2016. Quote, my sister was just glowing about how well they got along. They were just peas in a pod. And in fact, things were going so well with Cheryl and Mike that the couple was actually planning on selling the home in Ogden. And they were going to move to a new property that they purchased in March of that year, 2017. And the property was officially theirs on May 3rd of 2017. And the property was located in Caldwell, Idaho. That's right. The property Mike was living with Nadja and Peyton at was actually the property that he and Cheryl bought. And Mike and Cheryl had bought it with the intention of living out their golden years on it. A coworker of Cheryl's named Jamie Drake spoke about Cheryl's plans to spend her retirement there. Quote, Cheryl bought the farm with her husband Mike, and they planned to go there to retire. Now, so technically speaking, the property was in Cheryl's name. Yeah, it wasn't even technically Mike's. It was in Cheryl's name. So, Cheryl, as we talked about, had bought her home in Ogden before meeting or marrying Mike. And Byron said that the couple had actually borrowed money on Cheryl's home in order to purchase the property in Idaho. And after 30 years, in early June 2017, Cheryl retired. She had finally retired from teaching and was ready to move up to her new home in Idaho and spend her golden years with her husband. I know, isn't this sad, guys? This is so freaking sad. Both Nadja and Cheryl seem like such sweet, decent women, decent people. And it just sucks because I feel like if Nadja and Cheryl had met in real life, I feel like they would have become friends. They had a lot in common. Now, Mike said that he had gotten some sort of private piloting job flying out of Boise, and I think that was one of the reasons they bought the property in Caldwell. Cheryl and Mike even signed up for the Valkyrie Riders Insane Bike Rally that was being held in Billings, Montana that year. It was going to be held on June 26th that year, and Cheryl and Mike had plans to attend. Remember, Cheryl was really into biking, as was Mike. Now, Mike had moved to Idaho first, and he told Cheryl he was taking contract work as a corporate pilot, and he told her he was living in his trailer that he usually took. Remember, Byron said that he had this, like, trailer thing, and he would stay in that when he would be away from Cheryl. He told her that's, you know, what he was living on the property, the trailer, as he was sort of getting the property fixed up for her. Meanwhile, back in Utah, Cheryl was readying the home to sell and, you know, packing up her stuff and getting ready to relocate to Idaho. Another coworker of Cheryl's named Julie Gross said she last saw Cheryl on June 6th. Quote, we had a meeting to say goodbye, and Cheryl was talking about her retirement and the farm. She told us about a shed on the property that she planned to convert into an art studio. She was passionate about art. However, I mean, are you all paying attention to the dates here? June 2017. Yeah, June 2017 is when things would start happening and Mike would be found out. And oh man, it's a nasty fallout. So, we don't know the exact events that happened on June 8th or 9th, 2017. No one really knows. We have some guesses and theories from evidence and stuff like that, but primarily it's really just theories. But what we do know for a fact is that by June 9th, 2017, Nadja, who was only 48, Peyton, who was only 14, and Cheryl, who was only 56, would all be dead. Yeah. Dead. So the prevalent theory that everyone thinks happened was that Cheryl planned to go up to Idaho to surprise her husband. And the reason most people, you know, think that this is true is because apparently Cheryl, told some friends that she was going to make the 5-hour trip to surprise her husband. She thought it'd be super romantic, wanted to check out the property, you know, see her hubby. Byron would also say that one of Cheryl's friends also told him this. Quote, the friend said Cheryl decided to surprise Mike and drop in on him at the farm. She was supposed to stay behind and sell their house while Mike did plumbing work, minor repairs, and painted some rooms. But having left her job at the school, she must have thought it would be a nice surprise to go to see him. We can't know for sure what her thinking was, but I remember she was supposed to go to Albuquerque, New Mexico for something. I can't remember what, but ended up in Idaho instead, so it makes sense. And yeah, that was the only, Byron was the only source I could see that said anything about, Cheryl having some sort of trip planned to Albuquerque. So it would later be discovered that Cheryl had actually arrived in Caldwell on June 8th, with Canyon County Sheriff Sergeant Charles Gentry saying, quote, I don't believe that Cheryl had been to this property before and that she wanted to come here and see it. But when Cheryl did show up to Idaho, did drive to the property that she alone technically owned, with plans to surprise her husband, she most likely, of course, found Nadja and Peyton instead. No one even knows if Mike was at the home when Cheryl arrived at the property. We don't even know, because we don't know what happened. But the assumption, no matter which way you slice it, is that Mike's double life caught up to him, and Cheryl and Nadja discovered each other, discovered a secret. And we know that the three women, 2 women and 1 teenager, technically, would all end up dead. We do know that each one of them died from a single gunshot wound to the head, execution style. And of course, you know, it is assumed Mike was the executioner, of course. And it is believed that he murdered all 3 of them in cold blood when his lies were found out, when his worlds collided. Isn't that just amazing, guys? What is it, just the narcissism? What is it, guys? What was this a-hole's plan? To move your mistress, I know Nadja didn't know, but in this, instant, to move your mistress to the property that your wife technically owns by herself, since it's only in her name. And what? You knew that she was on, Cheryl was on her way up there, and what? I was so flabbergasted. I was just what was this idiot thinking? What did he think? Another thing that we do know about that June 8th/9th is that Mike, who was 60 years old, spent a whole day in the home, 24 hours, with the 3 dead bodies. And after spending the stay here, he took off. Deputy U.S. Marshal Travel Humke was able to track down Mike's movements right after June 9th. Quote, the next morning on June 10th, Bullinger goes to breakfast in Nampa, Idaho, the next town over, and it is assumed that after that, Mike then had headed back to Utah. And this is because on June 11th, Mike was reportedly seen at a car dealership in Ogden. Cheryl's 2007 white Ford Focus was in the shop there, and he went and picked it up, leaving his truck behind. So meanwhile, in the days after June 9th, Nadja and Peyton's family and friends kind of started getting worried because I hadn't heard from them. The weekend of June 9th, Nadja was actually supposed to go back to Utah and pick up some horses, but of course, she never did. She never got the chance to. Michelle, one of Nadja's friends, thought that it was also weird that Nadja's cell phone wasn't even accepting calls. Nadja wasn't returning, Facebook messages or anything, and it was all very strange. Sydney, Peyton's friend, thought it was really strange that her friend hadn't returned her text from June 6th, which was weird. Like, she'd, gone several days between texts. You get it. You're far away and you got stuff going on. But she had never gone this long without, texting Sydney back. And Bethany, remember Peyton's other friend, thought it was strange that, Peyton would break their Snapchat streak that they had going on. Remember, she said that they had a Snapchat streak going back for 120 days, and she sent Peyton one on June 9th, and it was never opened. So about 10 days pass. All right? 10 days, guys. 10 days pass from when Nadja, Peyton, and Cheryl are murdered. And on Monday, June 19th, 2017, police finally went to Mike and Cheryl's property in Caldwell. Now, it was kind of hard to suss out because I think all of this sort of happened around the same time, but the police headed to the property to conduct a welfare check. Now, there were other sources that said this welfare check was started by one of Mike's sons. He hadn't been able to get a hold of his father, which was very unusual. Probably couldn't get a hold of Cheryl either. So he had called the Canyon County authorities and asked them to do a welfare check. Other sources said that it was Nadja and Peyton's family and friends who had alerted authorities to do the welfare check. Sydney's mother, Tammy Call, actually called the local Caldwell authorities. Quote, "We started to get more and more worried, and so my mom made a house call or a home check." And apparently Tammy can be heard on a dispatch tape saying, quote, "Nadja Medley, my daughter's really good friends with her daughter, and there's been no correspondence for the last 10 days. We're just a little bit concerned." So not sure who initiated the welfare check, but, regardless, a welfare check was called in. And when authorities arrived on Mike and Cheryl's property, as soon as they stepped out of their car, they knew something was wrong. They were immediately met with this foul, pungent odor. And we know what it was. And following that putrid, awful smell, they came to the shed that Nadja had showed on that video. Quote, "He could smell a foul odor coming from the shed, and then a large number of flies in the area. He then opens the door, can see through the door that there's a blue tarp over something. Makes entry." And this is according to Canyon County Sheriff Kieran Donahue. And inside, under that tarp, they found the partially covered bodies of Nadja, Peyton, and Cheryl. They were laid out side by side, partially hidden by the tarp. As police immediately began securing the crime scene and, looking for clues and evidence and all that, they saw that there were a number of dead birds and dogs on the property, 3 dogs specifically. They were believed to have been, the family pets. As we know, Nadja and Peyton loved animals. And authorities said that the birds and dogs were murdered as well. So I don't know if they found gunshot wounds in them or what. But yeah, it's just, the whole thing is just so sad. And then the dead animals on top is just, it's so terrible. Especially because of how much Nadja and Peyton loved animals. You know what I mean? That's what I read. I was like, oh, dude, they were animal lovers. And that's just an extra FU to this whole thing. Authorities also found a snake, a rat, and some rabbits that were still alive inside the house. Canyon County Sheriff's Chief Deputy, Marv Dashiell, told the press that they estimated the bodies were killed anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks before authorities had found them. He also added that due to the intense summer heat, all 3 of the bodies had badly badly decomposed. Donahue added, quote, "Once we got into the shed and removed the tarp, then we realized the enormity of what we were facing. We're at the top of summer. It's very hot. It's a very closed-in area, and so the decomposition is a little bit rapid, and they were in very, very poor condition, to the point where unrecognizable, if you will. All of this meant, of course, that the bodies could not immediately be identified." And dudes, they were so badly decomposed, they couldn't even tell if the bodies were male or female or how they had died. And I thought that was weird. I was like, wait, like, were they not, maybe they were wearing more like gender neutral clothes or something? Because like you would think like other factors would sort of like clue in, like if you're at least dealing with a male or a female, right? I just thought that was wild when they were like, yeah. Like when we first discovered them, we didn't even know. Male, female, we had no idea and couldn't tell what had killed them. Dashiell only said that the crime scene was, quote, gruesome, and stated that the victims ranged in age from 50s to teens. But he declined to elaborate further. That's all he said. Police interviewed neighbors. So remember, this is more of a rural area. And neighbors aren't like right on top of each other, you know? So it was a little more spread out. Like not like, you know, the nearest neighbor isn't like 2, 3, 4 miles away or anything, but like, you know, spread out a little bit. And this is also, you know, an area where hunting and shooting is very commonplace, right? So police were hoping maybe the neighbors had heard something, seen something, you know, anything, right? One of these neighbors was named Cindy Morrison, and she said that she thought she had heard a woman scream in the middle of the night, and it happened sometime between June 6th and June 10th. She couldn't remember the exact date. She said it was really early one morning, you know, like 1:30 a.m. All right, she's dead asleep. And she wakes up. She doesn't even know, like, really what woken her, but she thought she had heard a woman scream. Quote, "It sounded like a woman calling for help. I've lived out here 26 years and haven't heard anything like that before. It was loud, but I didn't hear anything more." And when she woke up and didn't hear anything further, she figured, like, oh, you know what? It's probably nothing. If it's something serious, one of the neighbors that are, like, closer to it will surely call it in, right? And I saw some people online kind of, like, talking smack about Cindy here, and I'm like, yeah, but again, like, this is a rural area, you know, like, gunshots and hunting and all that stuff is very commonplace. Middle of the night, dead asleep, you know what I mean? And again, maybe it was that scream or whatever that had woken her, but like when you first wake up like that, you know, middle of the night, you're just like, whoa, and you don't hear anything. I mean, yeah, what would you assume, right? You would probably start questioning like whether you actually heard that or you were just having like an intense dream. I don't know, I just thought that was like kind of cruel. Like there were some people talking smack about her in some of the subreddits that I came across. I'm like, that doesn't seem right. Other neighbors told authorities that they thought they heard gunshots approximately 10 days before, you know, prior to the bodies being discovered. But again, you know, it wasn't anything out of the ordinary. This is a hunting area. A lot of people target shoot. Mike was a target shooter. They knew that he had done that a couple times. And yeah, I saw some people talking smack on them too, like, who hears gunshots and doesn't call the cops? If you live in a rural area where hunting and target practice are common place. Like, come on, man. Like, some of these people, I was just like, are you being obtuse? Like, you're acting like they were, like, in downtown Boise or something, and people heard gunshots and didn't report anything. Quite frankly, if I lived in an area like that, I'm not even sure if I would, like, really register gunshots after a while. You know what I mean? Now, the first thing authorities were able to do, right, is track down who owned this property. That seemed pretty easy, and they saw that it was Cheryl's name. I'm sure Mike's name was somewhere in that property, too. I'm not sure how any of that stuff works. But, you know, it's pretty easy to assess, like, okay, we know this property belongs to someone named Cheryl Baker. And that is when Byron got a call. And the police were asking Byron, like, hey, do you know where your sister's medical or dental records could be located? And that was when he was notified the breaking news of 3 dead bodies being found on Mike and Cheryl's property, and he said that he hadn't seen or spoken with his sister in 10 days. He also noted that she had stopped making her near daily phone calls to their elderly mother, and verified that yes, Cheryl and her husband Mike owned the property. A friend of Cheryl's came forward and told police that the last text message she had received from her friend had come in on June 11th, and it read, quote, "Take care of my dogs. I don't know if I'm coming back." The couple's mules and dogs were still back in Utah. Remember, Cheryl hadn't quite shored everything up yet. And with all of this, it was very easy for them to connect Cheryl to this property at the very least. And, I think they were theorizing that she's probably one of the bodies. I don't know if maybe they were also thinking like, oh, it could be Cheryl and Mike, who's this third person? You know what I'm saying? And when they asked Byron, like, hey, okay, would there be anyone else at the property? Because we got 3 bodies, right? They knew of Mike and Cheryl. And they're like, okay, if 2 of these bodies are Mike and Cheryl, who's this third one? So they're asking Byron, like, hey, do you know of anyone else that they would have up there? And Byron was like, no, just them 2. I have no idea who else would be there with them. By Tuesday, June 20th, autopsies had been conducted on the bodies. They were identified as women, but that was pretty much all that was confirmed. Their identities were still being thoroughly searched. The autopsy was also able to conclude that they had each died from a single gunshot wound, execution style. Now, Byron was shocked when he was told that the 3 bodies were of 3 women. He was totally floored. Remember, everyone assumed Mike would have been one of the dead, right? Quote, I just don't know what to believe. There are 4 people involved here, 3 bodies, and someone who covered the bodies. Sydney, remember Peyton's friend, said that when they were told that the 3 bodies were female, they were also shocked. Quote, they told us there was 3 bodies, and me and my mom assumed it was Peyton, Nadja, and Mike. We weren't told until the press release that it was 3 female bodies that were found on the property. We didn't know who the third person could have been. And it is said on this same day, Nadja's former mother-in-law, so Todd and Mark's mother, had called the Canyon County authorities in Idaho, saying that she was worried because she couldn't reach Nadja or Peyton. By the next day, Wednesday, June 21st, police announced that Mike was wanted, but he was wanted for the failure to report 3 deaths on his property. They issued a nationwide, no bond, federal warrant, though they specifically said that he was not charged with any, charges to do with homicide or anything like that. It was strictly that he had failed to report there were 3 dead bodies on his property. However, Chief Deputy Dashiell did say that he was a person of interest at the very least. Quote, we have no idea where he would be at this time. We're hoping someone may know where he is. We are working with agencies inside the state of Idaho and agencies in surrounding states. He's got a lot of information that would make a determination on which way the case goes. We're trying to get formal identification done. It is gruesome. One of the things we want to know is why. We don't know. We're trying to put pieces together, reaching out to family members and friends. They reported that Mike was officially last known to have been in Ogden, Utah on June 11th. That seemed to have been the last official sighting of him. And they also reported how he was driving Cheryl's Ford Focus, and they gave the description and license plate of that. They also warned the public that despite appearances, Mike was considered armed and dangerous. Quote, we would consider him armed and dangerous at this time. If someone does come into contact with him or observe him, we request that they contact local law enforcement immediately. He also declined to say whether or not the murder weapon had been found. Quote, we can't positively say anything on that. He's the only person of interest we're seeking at this point. When asked if they thought Mike could have possibly been a victim of foul play himself, Dashiell just responded, quote, not here. And he declined to discuss any possible motive for the murders, just saying, quote, he could be anywhere. Now, Byron said he was pretty shocked when this announcement came out. Quote, it's a wrinkle I didn't expect. I don't know what could escalate to violence. He said Mike and his sister were, quote, laid-back people. And as far as he knew, right, they were in a happy, normal, monogamous relationship. Quote, I didn't notice any awkward violence between Cheryl and Mike. I trusted him. My trust in other people and my own judgment is now in question. Wouldn't that screw with your mind? That would absolutely screw with my mind. You'd be questioning every decision and judgment you've made. Byron also commented on that last text that Cheryl had sent her friend on June 11th, and he wondered if it was even sent from Cheryl. Because, all of her friends, and himself included, were this text is kind of weird. It's a little ominous, especially with the bodies being found. And they were like, I wonder if it was even Cheryl who had sent it, because it just sounded so unlike her. And as far as Mike being apprehended, Byron said, quote, I kind of hope they take him alive so we can get the full story, but I don't really care. And he wondered if maybe Mike had escaped into the backcountry somewhere. Remember, Mike was a wilderness expert, not to mention the most important part. He had, 10 days ahead on the cops. That is huge. And Byron was like, yeah, man, if there's anyone who could survive in the wilderness and wait this out, it's Mike. Michelle, Nadja's friend, was completely dumbfounded and floored when, all of this came out. Quote, I thought they had it wrong. I actually messaged the news channel and said, I think you're mistaken. He wasn't married. Yeah, like all of Nadja's and friends and family were finding out through the news reports, that Mike was married to Cheryl. And they were floored. Now, at the press conference that he was having, Dashiell declined to verify or say if Cheryl was one of the bodies they had found. Because, of course, as the story was breaking and that, it was Cheryl and Mike who owned this property, and, it was 3 female bodies, a lot of people were assuming that Cheryl was one of the bodies. And at this point, Nadja and Peyton hadn't been publicly identified yet. The public, no one knew about Nadja or Peyton yet. Dashiell only said that they did have concerns about 4 people connected to the property, one of those being Mike. By Saturday, June 24th, Rebecca had come forward and told the police and the press about Nadja and Mike, and she told them that she was worried that 2 of those bodies could be Nadja and Peyton. And of course, with Rebecca saying this is when the connection between, Mike and Nadja came out, and, Rebecca told, the press and the police about Nadja and Mike's relationship, how they met, and all that stuff that we went over. And she adamantly said that there was no way Nadja had any clue about Cheryl. There was no way that she knew Mike was married, had no idea who Cheryl was. And she was adamant, believe me, if Nadja had known that Mike was married, she would have immediately broken it off. And she was completely shocked at everything that had come out. Quote, so many scenarios have been going through my head, was he into polygamy? Was he into this? Was he into that? Both Mike and Nadja were very atheist, so maybe a fetish or something? Michelle, Nadja's other friend, was also reeling from everything coming out. It was such a whirlwind and such a shock. That's a lot to take in, right? Quote, I can't wrap my head around it. He put a lot of effort into keeping them apart for 2 years, and she, referring to Nadja, was posting stuff all over social media. And at this point, authorities declined to verify if the other 2 bodies were Nadja and Peyton, because they hadn't been able to officially confirm it yet. But of course, with Rebecca saying all this, with, information coming out about Cheryl, everyone kind of put 2 and 2 together and was obviously Mike was seeing Nadja on the side while being married to Cheryl, right? It was pretty easy to sort of put 2 and 2 together. I get why the cops didn't come out and state, oh yeah, this is what happened, because they got to verify it, right? On Friday, June 30th, the Canyon County coroner officially identified one of the bodies as Cheryl, and they did this through her dental records. And Cheryl's family released a statement that read, quote, our family is both saddened and relieved at the confirmation of Cheryl's death. We are grateful for a small bit of information so we can focus on celebrating her life and remembering all the good she has brought to the world. The frustration of unanswered questions will continue over time, but for the moment, we will gather friends and relatives to remember and celebrate her life. Thanks to all the well wishes, we grieve together and look for peace and further resolution of these events. Nancy, Cheryl's friend, said, quote, Mike took my dear friend. I miss Cheryl. I can't call her. I can't see her at book club. And he took all of that away. But remember, officially, Nadja and Peyton hadn't been officially confirmed yet, even though, the assumption was that the other 2 bodies were of them. And it was also at this time as more information, Nadja's Facebook, of course, was just looked through with all the press and stuff. Photos of her and Mike and Peyton and stuff were circulating around. And the assumption that everyone came to was that Mike's double life caught up with him, and he gunned down all 3 of them. At this point, no other updates were made in the case, just Cheryl's identification. Police were still searching for Mike at this point, and they hadn't released any updated information at, how that was going either. On Monday, July 3rd, with Mike still not being found, Canyon County authorities released surveillance photos of Mike that had been taken as he was in the Treasure Valley area in the lead up to the murders. They wanted people to have an up-to-date photo of him because the photo that was primarily circulating was his driver's license photo. And, he had changed a little bit since then. And that was pretty much the only update that, authorities gave. Canyon County spokesman Joe Decker said that police were purposely not releasing a lot of public information. And this was in order to prevent Mike from knowing, anything about, the leads they were chasing, the updates they had, or any of that. So they were purposely not saying anything. He also stated that they had received numerous tips in the case. Quote, we've received over 100 tips on the case, but CCSO, Canyon County Sheriff's Office, is not discussing any details or specifics on the tips coming in or the case itself. And for a couple of weeks, there were no updates or sightings of Mike. But then on Monday, July 17th, the sheriff's office announced that they had found Cheryl's car in Wyoming. It had been discovered on July 12th near Moran, quote, in a remote campground in the Bridger-Teton National Forest. It was found near the border of Grand Teton National Park at Pacific Creek Campground number 4. Apparently, Mike had worked in this area as a guide in the past, so obviously he knew the area really well. However, unfortunately, Cheryl's car may have been there for as long as 3 weeks before authorities had gotten to it. So Mike, once again, had a huge head start on them. Quote, the investigation has shown that the suspect likely entered Grand Teton National Park on June 11th. And this is according to Teton County Sheriff's Lieutenant Matt Carr. I guess surveillance photos showed Mike driving through the park's entrance in Cheryl's car. Quote, we have no record of him paying for a campsite. Authorities, of course, processed and searched the vehicle, but they have never come out and said what, if anything, they found. A multi-agency manhunt then began for Mike that included the FBI, U.S. Marshals Service, Teton County Sheriffs, National Park Service, the Forest Service, and the Wyoming Fish and Game Department, and they all participated and helped in this massive search for Mike. The entire Moran area was put on high alert, the campground was closed and evacuated, and authorities also closed major roads that went in and out of the area. They did announce that Mike was presumed armed and of course dangerous. Quote, we are using our dogs and aerial assets. Our primary objective is keeping the community safe. Some residents weren't too worried are on high alert, though. Quote, it would seem that if the car has been abandoned for 3 weeks, that it's a lot less likely that he's still around the area. That makes me a lot less worried. And this was according to a local resident named Gary Shockey. Which that was my thought when I came across this. I'm like, wait a minute. This car's been here for 3 weeks, though. How do you know he's still in the area, you know? So I think I would probably kind of have Gary's attitude. Just be like, he's been there 3 weeks? Would he still be in this area after this time? Police also cleared some houses that were in some local subdivisions. They believed Mike may be crashing in one of the many unoccupied homes in the area, but they never found any trace of him. They also asked the public to come forward if they had camped at the Pacific Creek Campground in the park between June 1st and July 17th. Now, one family of hikers would come forward and say that they thought they spotted Mike. They said they had encountered a man about a mile up the trail. It was a hiking trail that led from the campground. And they said they ran into him on this trail at the junction of Whetstone Creek and Pacific Creek. And they thought this guy just looked really out of place. Detective Dave Hodges said, quote, at this intersection here, the place where they last saw Mike, they encountered a man with no backpack, no water, no bear spray, no nothing. He looked disheveled and out of place. As he walked by, he puts his head down and doesn't say a word. At this point, Dashiell stated that they had no idea what, if any, ties or connection Mike could have had to Wyoming. Quote, we don't have anything that would put him in that location. We do know he's got family up in Montana. Then, on Thursday, July 20th, there was a possible sighting of Mike in the Falls Creek Road area of Boonville County near Swan Valley in East Idaho. And this is less than 2 hours from where Cheryl's car was found in the park. Falls Creek Road is a gravel road and is a main roadway through this popular recreation area that is located near the Snake River. It's a very popular, camping, hiking, outdoors area. And there were a couple of people who worked in the area who had called in the sighting of Mike. They thought they had seen him that Thursday morning. Boonville County Sheriff Sergeant Brian Lavelle said, quote, it was in a camp spot up there. It didn't sound like anyone talked to him. Lavelle stated the person that these people thought they saw was staying in a tent, but unfortunately, by the time deputies arrived in the area to scope it out, they couldn't find any trace of this guy, of a tent or anything like that. No remnants of a campsite or anything. Police did use helicopters, infrared, search dogs, in this area and the area where Cheryl's car was found to try to get some kind of a bead on Mike, but nothing was ever found. Authorities at Yellowstone, which was also near this area, were also put on high alert for Mike's whereabouts when this sighting of him came through. And they would end up actually holding a family hostage for over an hour as they worked to search for Mike. the Yellowstone authorities were. So on that morning, as the search for Mike was underway, there was a Missouri couple named Brett and Jenilyn Henry, and they were driving out of Yellowstone's east exit in their white Toyota with Missouri plates. They also had their underage child with them at the time. I believe they had just done some camping at Yellowstone, and when the sighting of Mike happened and the whole area was put on high alert, they were on their way exiting the park. And as he was, exiting, Brett started to notice that 2 Yellowstone Park rangers were following them. So upon driving about 14 miles outside of the park, Brett decided to pull over into a campsite. And I think he was going to try to let the rangers go ahead of him. But as soon as he started to do that, pull over, the rangers quickly shot ahead of him, pulled in front of him to block him, exited their vehicle, and drew their guns on this family. They ordered Brett to turn off his car and drop his keys out the window, and and asked for all of them to put their hands up. For some reason, the Henry's vehicle had been flagged as Mike's vehicle for some reason. After they were held for half an hour at gunpoint, 2 Park County, Wyoming Sheriff's Patrol vehicles arrived, and that's when Brett and Jenilyn were ordered out of their vehicle, placed in handcuffs, and moved into the separate patrol cars, as another armed officer stayed in their car with their underage child. After 52 minutes of interrogation, authorities finally let Brett show him his ID. And that's when they finally told Brett, like, oh, well, yeah, we're looking for a triple murderer in the area. Because this whole time, him and his wife were like, what is this about? What's going on? Like, why are you detaining us? And they declined to tell him anything. And after he showed him his ID, they were like, oh, yeah, we're looking for a triple murderer. It's no biggie. The family was then let go with no further explanation after Brett's ID had been run and verified. Isn't that wild? I would be so petrified. And on Friday morning, Bonneville County authorities put out word via Facebook, warning people in the area to be on the lookout for Mike, along with some photos of him that the Canyon County authorities had already disseminated. Did I say Boonville County earlier? My bad, I meant Bonneville. I think it's written here wrong on my notes. My bad. With this Facebook announcement, Lavelle said, quote, "Since I've put this out, we're getting tips on every man that's 60 years old with gray hair." He said there wasn't currently an active search for Mike ongoing, but, quote, "we have a lot of eyes up there." Decker said, quote, "Agencies across the country are aware of the case and are following up on tips in their jurisdictions," stating that the FBI was not officially involved in the case, but that county authorities were utilizing some of their resources. By Thursday, July 27th, a week later, authorities announced that they were scaling back their search for Mike because they had found nothing. Carr announced that unless new tips or leads came in, that they had to pull back. The Canyon County Sheriff's Office did issue a statement that read, quote, "We appreciate the tremendous work and resources that Teton County authorities used in their effort to locate Mr. Bullinger after the vehicle was located in their jurisdiction. They continually kept us updated with information regarding their search efforts and will continue to work closely with them on any new developments moving forward. Meantime, we're working with various other agencies both locally and out of state to apprehend Bullinger, who remains a wanted fugitive on a felony warrant for failure to report a death." Finally, dude, on Tuesday, August 8th, this is when Nadja and Peyton were officially identified. Authorities held a press conference, and this is when they told the public about Nadja and Peyton and how, yes, we've officially confirmed the other 2 bodies are theirs. So unlike with Cheryl, Nadja and Peyton didn't have dental records, so it took officials longer to, verify them. Canyon County Coroner Vicki DeGoyce Morris said, quote, "There was evidence found during the detective's investigation that was known to be strictly these people, and through that, we were able to get DNA off those items." They ended up matching that DNA found on those items with bone marrow of the bodies. Quote, "It isn't surprising at all, but there was hope against hope that it wouldn't be them. Now I have to go through grieving again because it's real," and this was according to Christine. Sydney said, quote, "When I lost Peyton, it wasn't just losing a best friend. It was losing part of my family, and it was losing part of myself. I can't get her voice out of my head. It was also at this time that police announced Mike's warrant was now a homicide warrant, and he was now wanted on 3 counts of first-degree murder." Donahue said, quote, "We gathered information and physical evidence and forensic evidence from that vehicle, which is critical to the case. We can't discuss that, but we're happy to get that car," in reference to Cheryl's car, because people were asking, okay, what evidence do you have? You're changing his warrant to homicide now? Have you guys found some more stuff? But, they declined to say anything, because remember, Mike was still out there, and they didn't, want him to know what they knew. This is when the U.S. Marshals officially took over over the search for Mike, and Marshal Humke said, quote, "We run those tips to the ground and do what we can to validate those tips. We welcome any tips as to Mr. Bullinger's whereabouts." Donahue said, quote, "In our opinion, he has shown a propensity to commit violence. This was a crime of passion or spur-of-the-moment crime. What happened between Mr. Bullinger and his wife Cheryl and Nadja? Was there, what the heck are you doing here? Only Mr. Bullinger at this point knows what actually took place there. You had this catalyst that happened, this cataclysmic event that all of a sudden these people find out about each other. And he believed then, quote, pain, rage, fury, whatever that emotion that triggered him to pull the trigger. It was then that cascading effect. Once you've killed someone, there's no way back." He said Mike's head start had given him a great advantage. Duh. And it wasn't just the fact he got a head start. It was the fact that he had knowledge and expertise, particularly in like the woods and stuff, right? Quote, 3 weeks in a case like this, that's a big jump on law enforcement. We look at this case as anything is possible, and our net is very broad. He declined to discuss motive or the relationship between the women and Mike. Quote, "Certainly there's a relationship. The common denominator is Mr. Bullinger, and the other common denominator is that all three of these people were found in the same place. Only Mr. Bullinger knows the true motive for these heinous crimes," and he stated that tips were still pouring in. Chief Deputy Criminal Prosecutor Chris Topmiller said, quote, "Some of those leads have produced evidence, and that is what led them to charge Mike with homicide," because people were asking, like, again, like I said earlier, what made you charge him with homicide? What changed? And that is all authorities said on that. Nadja and Peyton's family issued a statement through the sheriff's office after they had been officially publicly identified. Quote, "Nadja and Peyton Medley were tragically taken from us this summer, and everyone impacted by this, both family and friends, are staying close to one another, encouraging one another, and supporting the local and federal authorities. Collectively, we are praying that the truth will be revealed and we will be able to begin the road to healing. Though we have wanted to publicly address the situation for some time, we chose to respect the direction of the investigators in this case by avoiding making any public statements. We've been working closely with the authorities throughout this time and will continue to do so, but we ask that you honor our request for privacy during this difficult time as we mourn and grieve. Thank you for your prayers and well wishes, and we greatly appreciate your continued support." And 2 months after Nadja, Peyton, and Cheryl had been found, Mark, remember Nadja's brother-in-law, visited the site, the property where Nadja and Peyton were found. He said, quote, "It was extremely emotional, extremely stressful. It was sadness mostly, going through their personal belongings and finding things that reminded me of them." He was tasked with collecting Nadja and Peyton's belongings, and he had actually handled all of Nadja's interests with her family being back in Germany and all, so he decided to step in and help with that on the US side. He said the property was a mess and smelled awful after just being vacant for 2 months. He said he found journals, pictures, and the bodies of several pets, including dogs, cats, and a snake, after they'd been locked up in the house, is what he said. So I was confused because authorities were supposed to have taken animals from the house when they discovered the bodies. So I don't know if they had so many animals, they missed them or something. I don't know, but I just thought that was so sad. He said it was very difficult imagining what Nadja and Peyton's very last moments in life felt like. And he insisted once again that Nadja had no idea Mike was married. She, quote, "had no idea that he was married to his wife. If she had, she never would have gotten involved with him, and more so, she never would have moved up to Idaho with him. I know for a fact they didn't know Cheryl Baker. Nadja was not aware Mike was married." Jamie, Cheryl's friend and co-worker, kind of echoed the same sentiment that these women did not know each other. Quote, "She thought her husband was living in a trailer on the farm fixing the place up by himself. She didn't know this other woman and her daughter was with him. She had no clue he was having an affair, not one suspicion. They seemed happily married. She never spoke bad of him. Yes, he was away all the time with his work, but that's something she accepted." Julie, Cheryl's other friend, echoed the same thing. Quote, "She seems so happy talking about it, the farm. It is very sad. Why would she have said that if she knew about this other woman? She was never phony. She never said anything to upset people." Mark said he was especially frustrated because Nadja, Peyton, and him had actually started, growing quite closer after they visited him in Albuquerque. That had been in 2015, so after Todd's death. And after this trip that they had, he had really grown close to them, especially his niece. He said before this, it was kind of difficult getting to know either of them just due to the distance. But yeah, after this, he started to form a close relationship with them. Quote, "It felt like Peyton and I were just starting to get to know each other, and then this happens. It's a hard pill to swallow." And he wondered, what could have possibly motivated Mike to gun down these people that he was supposed to have loved? Quote, "Why wouldn't you just leave them alone? Why in the world would you go this far with what you did? What was your motive? And he vowed to keep the women's case alive. And he hoped someone would see Mike somewhere at some point and turn him in. Michelle, Nadja's friend, added, quote, "Not that answers are going to make anything better, but I need to know why. Why did he have to do this? You know, why couldn't he just walk away? Why did these wonderful women have to die?" Byron, Cheryl's brother, added, quote, "My problem with this whole issue is, what was Mike's plan? Why kill all of them and the 14-year-old daughter? If you've got two women, you choose one and tell the other one to go home." And he said that he did have his theories. Quote, "The closest theory I can come up with is he wanted Cheryl to sell the house in Ogden, which was in her name, so he could cash in on the money before leaving her for his mistress. But that's just a guess. But why organize for both women to come to the new house in Idaho? They always seem to struggle for money considering he was a pilot. But then again, he was living two lives." As the 6-month mark passed on this case in December, still no sign of Mike. And at this point, 6 months in, is when investigators started throwing out their theory that they believed Mike was dead. Donahue didn't think that Mike could survive the winter in the Wyoming wilderness, even with all of his, skills and background. Quote, "As you come into that fall time, and of course wintertime now, those chances are really remote that a person, even if they are familiar with the outdoors, those chances are becoming more and more slim." But he did add there was the possibility he was still alive. Quote, "Is there a chance that Mr. Bullinger left that car and then deliberately was able to get access to get out of the area, perhaps out of the country? All of those possibilities are open. They truly are." He did state that people should still be on the lookout for Mike and to, remember, not approach him. Quote, "This man has shown a propensity to kill, without question, unequivocally, and not just to kill, but to kill those he allegedly loved. Now, that is serious." And when no further trace of Mike could be found, when the 1-year anniversary came up on the case in 2018, Donahue announced that all of his instincts told him that Mike was dead, and that his body was somewhere still in the Teton National Forest in Wyoming, and he was saying that he believed Mike died from either suicide or exposure. Quote, "I think the case is solved, 100% solved. With the forensic evidence we have and the facts of the case, we have solved the crime. I believe he is dead, either from taking his own life or dying from exposure to the elements. That said, we will not stop our investigation until we can locate him or positively identify his remains. We owe that to the families of the victims and the family of Mr. Bullinger, so they can finally have some sense of closure in this case. As we approach the year anniversary of this heinous crime, my detectives and I continue to work diligently on every possible lead in hopes of locating Mr. Bullinger. It is our unequivocal belief that Mr. Bullinger is the person responsible for the senseless killing of 3 innocent women, one of whom was just a teenager. We have been in this business a long time, and we rule nothing out. We maintain the possibility that he is still alive." And they theorized the reason that they hadn't been able to find any trace of his body or remains was because it was possible they had been scattered and just ravaged by scavengers and wildlife. And they also said that it was possible his body or remains would never be found. Now, Jackie, Mike's first wife, and others who knew Mike, they didn't really believe what Donahue was saying. They didn't believe that Mike could kill himself. Those who knew him, legit, they knew how slick Mike was. They knew how smart he was, how capable, and how good of a manipulator he was. They all believed that Mike was still very much alive, and they believed, Jackie and a bunch of other Mike's friends who knew him believed that he was more than likely living with another woman who he had talked into taking him in. That's what they believed. One friend who knew Mike for a decade said, quote, "If you know about sociopaths, you know they're unlikely to kill themselves. He would have to feel guilty, and he doesn't have a conscience." And Christine, Nadja's friend, agreed with this. Quote, "People have said he probably went out into the woods and shot himself. I think he's too egotistical for that." Byron, once again, talked about how Mike's manipulation had really, screwed with him mentally, and how he didn't really, trust his own judgment or trust other people like he once did. Quote, "I don't trust my own judgment on people anymore. I thought Mike was a nice guy. I'm not sure we would know the true story even if Mike were found." Mark spoke about the heartache that his family still suffered. Quote, "It's been extremely heart-wrenching. I was standing next to my mom, and she let out a yell or a scream or a cry and just started crying hysterically." Jackie spoke out about her experience with Mike and talked about the violence and abuse, she had endured and how nobody had done anything for her. Quote, "I think if anyone had intervened, had called him on his behavior, these women wouldn't be dead now. I don't know what's wrong with Mike Bullinger. I know there's a lot wrong with systems that let him get away with this." And she admitted that she had always feared Mike would one day kill her. Now, at this point, some of Mike's family had come out and I get it, it's probably hard to accept, but they were like, "Oh, Mike might have walked in on like a violent scene and took off for fear of his life. Whatever, dude. Like, not only did everyone eye roll that, investigators came out and like adamantly said there is like less than zero evidence pointing to anything to support this theory. And yeah, like I kind of feel sorry for them, right? Like how do you wrap your head around that, you know? An anonymous friend of Cheryl theorized about what might have happened that day. They were like, I'm sure Cheryl, drove up to Caldwell thinking she was going to see her husband and instead stumbled upon Nadja and Peyton. Quote, there may have been this colossal meeting of women in his life who had no idea the other existed and things got out of hand. But Christine just didn't understand why Mike would go to murder after being found out. Quote, why, instead of leaving them, why did he have to kill them all? You can just imagine, maybe he lost it. Jackie expressed hope that her ex-husband would be caught and found one day. Quote, I want him to be caught. I want him to have to say something. Mark added if it did turn out that Mike was dead, quote, he would save us all the pain of going through a trial and hearing his reasoning or his lies of why he did what he did. But Byron just said, quote, I try not to think of it regular, but when I do, it's the sort of thing I wake up at 3 a.m, stare at the ceiling and ponder why. Mark, of course, also wanted to know why. Everybody did. But Mark said, quote, why did he do that? Why did he do this? If I could get into the mind of the sociopath and figure out why they do what they do, I could answer that question. And he also accepted that, there may very well never be any more updates in Nadja and Peyton's cases. Quote, Nadja and Peyton were both very kind, nurturing, loving, very intelligent and gifted people that had a lot to offer their world. Christine said the anniversary gave her unease. Quote, we're all going to die, but you hope people have a dignified death. Those are the things that still haunt me. Jackie said she felt sorry for her and Mike's sons, who have declined commenting on their father publicly. I probably would too. And she said, quote, I feel sad for my boys and for my granddaughter who had just seen Mike a week before the killings. He killed this little girl just a year older than his granddaughter. Isn't that heartbreaking? Jeez, dude, like I don't even know. If I found out one of my family members was like a cold-blooded killer, like I would feel, I don't know how exactly I would feel. I would think that I would just feel like disgust and I would be so angry. Donahue spoke about how they still receive tips in Mike's case, even a year later. And these tips were usually like alleged sightings, but he did not discuss what evidence they had collected in the course of their investigation. And he said they were still keeping it close to the chest just in case Mike was still alive. Quote, I can't be specific because it's protecting the integrity of the case. Imagine we find Mr. Bullinger alive someday. We want nothing to impede the investigation. And on Tuesday, August 7th, 2018, Detective Hodges, along with 20 other investigators who are with the Idaho Fugitive Task Force, the Teton County Sheriff's Office, and cadaver dogs, all searched the Bridger-Teton National Park Forest once again to see if they could find any trace of Mike. They were armed with, guns, bear spray, radios, survey tape, maps, and they split into 4 teams as they began searching the wilderness. They started in the area where those hikers thought that they had spotted Mike back in 2017. That was where they started their search at. Supervisor Deputy U.S. Marshal with the task force, Pete Thompson, said, quote, we are confident that he stayed in this area. We think the search we're doing will be productive. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. The task force had driven in from Boise, Idaho, to team up with the local deputies, and they zeroed in on about a 4-mile radius about northwest from the Pacific Creek campground. And they were able to zero in on this specific 4-mile radius after the dogs had hit on some certain spots. Quote, we're putting a lot of eyes on a small area. That's what we didn't have the opportunity to do last year. What are we looking for? Bones, tattered clothes, a firearm. If we do find him, it's a crime scene. This isn't a manhunt, it's a body hunt. This search is important for the families of the deceased. None of them expected this and certainly didn't deserve it. As far as we know, he took no equipment with him for a long stay in the wilderness, and this was according to Detective Hodges. And he also believed at this point, along with Donahue, that Mike was dead, adding, quote, I think we'll find his bones scattered. Scavengers have had a year to work on them. The teeth would be the last to go. The skull is fairly fragile. Now, investigators thought they had hit a break when they found a firearm in the water, but it wasn't what they were looking for. Quote, the firearm was in good shape. It was found in the water closer to Yellowstone than Pacific Creek. And this was according to Detective Hodges. He spoke about Mike's expertise in the area and how that did give him an advantage over law enforcement on top of the head start. Quote, he was a horsepacker early in his life in the Yellowstone region. He worked as a guide for a couple Yellowstone outfits in the Thoroughfare and Lamar areas. And Thompson added to this, saying, quote, the victims passed 14 days before we knew. Those first few days of a homicide are super important for us. We were behind the 8 ball from the beginning. Bullinger had quite the head start on us. But Hodges believed that if Mike had walked into the Wyoming wilderness in June of 2017, his movements, even then, would have been hindered by snow. Quote, we believe the snow line was almost to the campground. It's why we don't think he escaped that far into the wilderness. Teton County Sheriff Sergeant Todd Stanion echoed the same sentiment, explaining that the terrain that they were currently searching was very rough and it was far-fetched to think anyone, even a seasoned professional like Mike, could have survived the harsh Wyoming winter. Quote, it's a huge expanse up there, tough terrain. And they also believed that just normal hikers, fishermen, and campers might even be able to find some of Mike's remains as well. Quote, we believe he is here. Mark said, quote, once he is found, I believe it will bring closure to our family and his family and everybody involved with this horrific experience. I am very glad they are keeping on top of this and not letting him think he's going to get away with it with all this time going by. Byron said, quote, he could be in another country. He's a pretty good schmoozer. I'm under the impression he could get away with it. I mean, you can live off the grid to a certain extent. I have little hope of a good resolution even if he is found alive. I still don't understand it. I don't know what his plan could have been. He had a girlfriend on the side and he was married. I don't understand it. Nothing makes real sense. You pick one woman and tell the other to go home. You don't kill them all. But he said, though it was very tragic and had certainly left him questioning his judgment, he didn't let his sister's murder kind of consume his life. Quote, I'm not out there walking the trails or putting out wanted posters. If he is out there, I don't want him thinking I'm chasing him. He could show up at my door. I don't want to say I'm not hopeful, but I have no control over it. Time heals wounds. But unfortunately, the search that the task force did yielded nothing. Nothing at all. In June of 2019, 2 years after the murders, authorities came out and said that they were basically at the same point that they were at in 2018, in that they believed Mike was dead through the evidence that they had collected. Quote, we did collect evidence that indicates that he's dead. However, I don't think we can be closed-minded in this investigation. At this particular point in time, we are still receiving tips. The evidence in this case is extremely strong. We're just missing the bad guy, and this was according to Lieutenant Gentry. Mike's case was featured on In Pursuit with John Walsh, which did generate more alleged sightings, but nothing of substance. Teton County Lieutenant Lloyd Funk believed that if Mike had killed himself in the Teton National Forest, it was obviously outside of the search radius that they had covered when they searched it in 2018. And he pointed out that the forest had 3.4 million acres of land and contained lots of wolves, coyotes, grizzly bears, lots of scavengers, lots of predators. And Donahue had hoped that the start of the hunting season would maybe, yield something. Maybe someone would find some kind of remains or something. But nothing was ever found. By November 2020, Mark was expressing his frustration with any lack of update in the case. Quote, the sadness of the whole situation, it is now being replaced with frustration. Nothing had been found about Mike, and the theories and the debates raged and fueled online about whether Mike was dead or alive. Donahue said, quote, we still believe his last known whereabouts were in a national forest in Wyoming, but unfortunately we can't produce the body at this time. We want to find justice or accountability for this family. We want to close the book, and it might take us some time, but we're not going to give up. In July of 2021, the Henrys, remember that couple that had been detained when they were exiting Yellowstone? They decided to file a federal lawsuit against the Park County authorities for holding them at gunpoint without cause, and said that they were subjected to emotional anguish, mental duress, psychological harm, fear, and humiliation as a result of this whole incident. According to the suit, quote, the terrified family went on its way without receiving an apology or additional explanation. The suit claimed that the Henrys' Fourth Amendment rights had been violated, and they filed 3 claims alleging false arrest, excessive force, and false imprisonment. They wanted a jury trial. They were seeking financial damages, and if the jury ruled in their favor, they wanted the jury to determine the financial amount. They were being represented by Cheyenne, Wyoming attorney Robert Moxley, and alleged that authorities did not allow them to identify themselves, produce identification, did not tell them why they were being detained, what they were looking for, and they also claimed that, like Brett, bore no resemblance to Mike at all, other than having gray hair. By late September of 2021, the Park County authorities and the National Park Service Rangers rangers moved to have the suit dismissed entirely, citing qualified immunity. And just in case you're not aware of what qualified immunity is, it covers any reasonable actions taken by law enforcement while they're on the job, even if they are violations of the law or the Constitution. So basically, yeah, cops can violate your rights in the course of their job with this qualified immunity. They also contended that the Hemrys did not make an adequate claim for relief in their suit, in their complaint. Now, the sheriff's officers, of course, claimed that they did not knowingly violate any of their amendment rights, and stated that their suit wasn't clear as to whether they were involved in holding them against their will, and stated that they did not use excessive force under the circumstances. They also stated that since the suit did not specify the individual officers involved, the claims the family were making were insufficient. In a separate motion, attorneys for the park rangers made the same claims and stated that stopping the family while searching for Mike was the result of their reasonable suspicion and therefore did not violate the Fourth Amendment. And pulling their guns on a family with an underage child was reasonable. Quote, as far as the rangers knew at the time, Bullinger was in that white Toyota, except now he had passengers as well, who may have been complicit in his plan or may even have been hostages. So you're going to pull your guns on hostages? That includes a minor child? And on November 12th, 2021, 10th Circuit Court Judge Alan Johnson ruled that qualified immunity protected the sheriff's office and the park rangers in Brett's detainment, but not in Jenilyn's. Johnson said that because the officers had a reason to detain Brett, because he may have been Mike, because he was older with white hair driving a white car, and rangers had been told that Mike was driving a white car for some reason, their qualified immunity was in play. But it was not in Jenilyn's detainment, since officers should have recognized she was not Mike. Quote, this court concludes that probable cause supported Mr. Hemry's arrest, but not Mrs. Hemry's. And the officers had 60 days to file an appeal to this ruling, and that was the latest update I could find in that suit. I don't know if it was dropped, if it was settled, or what was going on with it. But yeah, that is the wild, still unsolved case of Mike Bullinger. Isn't that wild? Wild. I don't understand guys like this. I don't understand why you have to live this double life. I don't get it. I don't know what his plan was. It's wild. And of course, now I'm asking y'all, what do you think? Do you think Mike is still alive? Do you think he's dead? And I gotta tell you, I honestly don't know. I could certainly believe that he's still alive, for sure. But because authorities haven't come out and said what they have, right? So it's do you know for a fact that he didn't exit Wyoming after dropping Cheryl's car off there? Do you know that for a fact? What did you find in his car? Did you find a suicide note? Did you find blood? What did they find, And because, they haven't said what they found, it's really up for debate on, is Mike alive? Did he kill himself? I don't know if there's anyone that could survive in the woods like that. It would definitely be Mike, right? He has the experience and the knowledge. So yeah, I don't know. I'm asking y'all, do you think Mike is alive? Do you think he died in the forest? I'm totally anxious to know what you guys think. And yeah, I guess that will do it. My battery's about to die, so let me quickly sign off before it dies. I will be back again September 19th. Sorry again, I have to go to every 2 weeks. Believe me, I'm working on stuff and I want to add content to the channel so that I actually am uploading every week, but it's just different stuff, true crime stuff. So yeah, thank you so much. I need to get caught up. Look man, I'm so behind I couldn't even put Halloween decorations up. It's September, it's Halloween season, damn it. I don't care. So yeah, that's how you know I'm far behind, is that I didn't even get a chance to put up my Halloween stuff. Alrighty guys, I will see you in 2 weeks. Just give me a few months to catch up, and I think I can get back to doing every week with some new stuff mixed in there. I hope you take care of yourself. Have a wonderful week. Remember, don't be a dick. Don't be a douche. Don't be like Mike here, alright? Be a decent person and leave a little sparkle wherever you go. Alrighty y'all, I will see you in 2 weeks. Take care. Bye-bye.